We all know that Dom and Little B will survive that massive cliffhanger in the ending of Fast X, so what's the twist in store for Fast X Part 2? Dom holds Little B tightly as they brace for the coming impact of the booby-trapped dam. However, the menacing beeping of Dante's bomb suddenly stops, and in an anticlimactic moment, no massive explosion occurs. Nearby, a frustrated Dante throws a temper tantrum, kneels dramatically, and screams to the heavens. And from high above the scene, it's revealed that Mr. Nobody has been following the action from a stealth aircraft, 40,000 feet in the air. More importantly, it was Mr. Nobody who shut down Dante's bombs with a modified version of Project Ares. While Ares was designed to control any weapon system remotely, Mr. Nobody creates a pacifist version that only shuts down smart weapons. This is the real reason why Mr. Nobody went missing after that plane crash in F9. He was developing a contingency plan against Project Ares, knowing that it could all too easily end up in the wrong hands. Mr. Nobody's plane then swoops down to attack Dante and Ames and rescue Dom and his son. So for now, Dom and Little B are safe. And it's all thanks to Mr. Nobody. With Fast X Part 2 being the last movie in the franchise, Mr. Nobody won't be the only heavy hitter to return for one last endgame style fight. But wait, what about the rest of Dom's crew? Fast X Part 2 reveals what really happened after Ames shot down the plane carrying Tej, Roman, Han, and Ramsay. The four of them scramble to the back of the plane to avoid the brunt of the impact. And while Roman, Tej, and Han get severely injured, they wake up alive amid the wreckage. However, Ramsay is not as lucky as her friends. As Tej comes to, he finds Roman crying his eyes out while tightly clutching Ramsay's lifeless body. Nearby, Han weeps in silence while comforting Tej. After all, Fast X Part 2 closes the mainline Fast saga, so it needs at least one impactful death from among Dom's ranks. That being said, Ramsay isn't just a sacrificial lamb for shock value. When Dom's crew finally regroups, Roman, Han, and Tej are charged with collecting Ramsay's belongings for her family. And amid the tech knickknacks that the hacker left behind, Tej unearths an old VHS tape. Thankfully, Roman still has an old VHS player from their hijacking days, so they play the tape to see what it contains. If you're watching this, I'm already dead, says Ramsay in the fuzzy video. What you're about to see, well, I took this secret to the grave for a good reason. As it turns out, Ramsay kept an encrypted failsafe protocol for controlling the God's Eye, the mass surveillance program that she created. More precisely, this protocol allows anyone to shut down the God's Eye permanently, forever destroying the program in the process. In the video, Ramsay explains why she kept the protocol hidden. I know there's a traitor in the agency, I just don't know who. We can't trust anyone outside our crew. And before the video ends, Ramsay tells the crew that only a handful of people can decrypt her failsafe code. Just the smartest, most resourceful hackers in the world. Barring that, just ask Tej. So while Ramsay dies, she also gives Tej the power to shut down the God's Eye, taking away Dante's ability to see everywhere in Fast X Part 2. Unable to track down their enemies, Dante and his men get a rude awakening. Luke Hobbs was last seen getting threatened by Dante for killing his dad, Hernan Reyes, but Hobbs has never been one to take things sitting down. Instead of waiting for Dante to strike, Hobbs deals the first blow by targeting Dante's ally and new head of the agency, Ames. Finally, the long-awaited battle of the Titans goes down in Fast X Part 2. When Ames and Hobbs face each other, the giants somehow achieve a mutual understanding. "No weapons," says Hobbs, throwing down his pistols to the ground. For a moment, Ames considers shooting Hobbs, but eventually agrees to his terms. "Fine, this is gonna be fun, old man." Despite his confidence, however, Ames is ultimately no match for the indomitable Hobbs, who eventually gets the upper hand. Like the classic villain that he is, Ames uses his final words to warn Hobbs. Dante is coming for you. He's coming for all of, but Hobbs snaps his neck before he can finish. While this last threat does slightly unnerve Hobbs, it's really Dante who should be worried in the sequel. Last seen handing over Little B to Jacob in Europe, Mia Toretto seemingly disappeared in Fast X. But as it turns out, the harrowing events prompted Mia to convince a retired crew member to jump back into the fray. And that crew member is Mia's husband, Brian O'Connor. If you think this can't possibly happen, here's the real twist. Instead of digitally recreating Paul Walker's face, Fast X Part 2 has a simpler solution to the late actor's absence. Paul's younger brother Cody Walker will play Brian again, but this time without the aid of AI or CGI. This allows the sequel to not just address Brian's long absence, but also to honor Paul Walker without courting controversy. Finally, Brian and Mia reunite with Dom's crew in another emotional moment in Fast X Part 2. That said, they're not out of the woods yet. In fact, the crew is gonna need every bit of Brian's superior driving skills. No, not Sean Boswell. We're talking about the original Drift King, Takashi, the main antagonist of the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. As it turns out, Dante has always been a big fan of DK. Meanwhile, even though Sean is no longer around, the OG Drift King still has a score to settle with Han, who is actually still alive. So while Dante loses Ames in Fast X Part 2, he's also bringing back the most unexpected villain from the earliest parts of the Fast saga. This paves the way for the franchise to actually return to its roots, pitting the skills of guys like Dom, Brian, and Han against Dante and the original Drift King of Tokyo. And this brings us to our next plot prediction. The main Fast saga ends where it all began, on the wild streets of LA, where Dom and Brian first forged their brotherhood. After failing to kill Dom and Little B, Dante gets under Dom's skin again by targeting their grandmother, Abuelita Toretto. So the final race will be a good old Los Angeles Royal Rumble. When the crew figures out Dante's plan of grabbing Abuelita, Dom reveals that he's kept souped up versions of their old cars secretly hidden in an underground garage, Dom's personal demolition derby stash, and the crew rolls out in some of the most classic cars from the franchise. While his Dodge Charger is out of commission, Dom drives a 1993 Mazda RX-7. Brian gets behind the wheel of a 1995 Toyota Supra MK4, finished in an even more ostentatious shade of orange than the original. And when a 97 Nissan 240SX roars out of the garage, its windows lowered to reveal Letty in the driver's seat. The crew rushes to Abuelita's home to save her from Dante. However, when they come upon an empty crossroads, Dom's crew finds two cars ominously parked in the middle of the street, DK's Nissan Fairlady Z and Dante's purple 66 Chevy Impala. When Dom answers his phone, Dante tells him, "Whenever you're ready, Dominic." The Impala roars. Dante and Dom's crew stare each other down from across the crossroads. Suddenly, DK floors it and his Nissan drifts into the street between the crews, getting the head start in the race towards Abuelita's home. The first to react is Han, who chases after DK in a 2002 Nissan Silvia. "I'm coming, Abuelita," Dante shouts as he drives after the two, with the rest of Dom's crew following right behind them. And this brings us to our very last plot prediction for Fast X Part 2. By the end of this LA demolition derby / street race, only Dom and Dante are left racing towards Abuelita. On the radio, Tej tells Dom that Dante's car is rigged to blow up. So less than a mile from Abuelita's house, Dom engages his car's nitrous to ram Dante's Impala into an empty building, and the explosion levels the entire block, with Dom making the ultimate sacrifice for family, eliminating Dante in the process. The sequel finally closes the book on the Fast saga. So what do you think of our plot predictions for Fast X Part 2? Tell us your own theories and thoughts in the comments, and keep watching Screen Rant.